I am going to simply teach you how to make scones. They're delicious, it's excellent with coffee, and they're really easy to make, despite what most people believe baking is some kind of magic trick, but it's really not. Just time and patience. So I will show the recipe at the end of the show, but we're going to start out with 10 ounces of flour. And if you don't have a scale, I've measured out 10 ounces of flour is roughly 2 cups of flour, but not packed in there, just kind of like lightly. 2 1/4, but I'd start with 2. You could always add more dry. You're better off like having to add more dry than adding wet, because that doesn't really work out. So I got my flour in the bowl, and then we're going to do a 1/3 cup of sugar. So I'm going to add the dry together. That's the sugar and the flour. Next up is a 1 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. So you kind of mix that all together, and you could use a spoon or a spatula, your hands. I like to use my hands, but I'll spare you and keep it clean. Just joking. Next up is butter, cubed. So you want a butter. You want a 1/4 pound cubed. So I just cut it up with a bench knife or a knife, whatever you got used. So just kind of like 1-inch cubes, and break them up. So you got all the dry ingredients and then the butter, and just break them up. And then it's good to use your hands. The good thing about this recipe is you don't need a mixer. So if you got a solar oven and you're camping, you can make scones in the morning for the sleepyheads who are up late at night around the campfire. Anyway, I digress. Scones are traditionally British, I believe. I'm pretty sure. I probably should have looked that up before I told you that. So yeah, this doesn't take too long, and what you're looking for is like breadcrumb-like texture. This is a good recipe, and I've had many people compliment me on this. I used to own a bakery up in Nederland, Colorado, outside of Boulder. So yeah, you just kind of do that, like squeeze it and pinch it, as they say. Probably have some music, but then you wouldn't be able to hear me. I mumble as it is, so I'll try to speak louder, because maybe I'm not speaking loud enough. Alright, so there's that. Ta-da! And then next up you want 2 eggs. Now you could crack them in there, but I kind of like to whisk them a bit. I feel like it incorporates better. So yeah, just whisk them lightly, nothing crazy. And add it. And then yeah, just like kind of turn the bowl. It's a good trick as you're mixing. So it also calls for, and that you typically mix with the eggs, but this is fine. It calls for a 1/2 teaspoon. This isn't open yet. It's brand new. 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. But I did add some lemon zest in here with the flour, with the dry ingredients, before I started my stream. So I'm going to go with lemon extract. And I'm going to add blueberries. Fear not, I've checked these blueberries out, so the recall at Costco, these don't apply. Nobody's going to die making scones today. So So yeah, once you get the vanilla in there and the eggs mixed with the butter, the flour, the sugar, and the baking powder. So there's that. Super crummy, very dry. Okay. Then we want a quarter. I can't find my liquid measurement, so I'm using this one. A quarter, a little less than a quarter of milk, or rice milk, or almond milk, or if you're doing like orange scones, you can use orange juice, just a liquid. Cream, but that'll give you a different kind of scone. So yeah, again, pretty dry. It's all going to come together. And then I add my fruit. You could do fresh fruit. Keep in mind, with fresh fruit, you're going to be adding more moisture, as well as the frozen, but they're frozen, so they don't really have the same effect as like fresh strawberries. So I do about, kind of eyeball it, but I do about a cup. And then, you know, adding more if you like. You don't want to add too much fruit, because then the scone dough doesn't really adhere. And see, again, we got very dry mix here. So I didn't exactly add a quarter. That's why I like to bake. I like to add a little less than a recipe says. And that way, you could play with it more. You're not, if you add too much, and granted you could always add more flour, but then you're ruining the balance of like the baking soda, baking powder, that is. So then I just kind of bring it together. Until it's together. It's best to do this on the surface. Right? And, you know, floured surface is okay, but then again, you don't want to dry them out because it's already kind of a dryish thing. You don't want to dry them out too much. So, American scones, I worked in many bakeries, and American scones, they do this, and then they cut them into triangles, but traditionally, and this is how I did it at my bakery, I just did circles. And if you don't have a cutter, which I do, but I don't know where it is, I just kind of like make little balls and squish them down. And that's how you make scones. Here's the recipe. Quarter pound of butter, 10.5 ounces of flour, or 2 cups, 1/3 a cup of sugar, or 2.5 ounces, and 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 eggs, half a teaspoon of vanilla, and a 1/4 cup or so of milk. I'll be back, and next up, I'll be taking them out of the oven. Thanks for joining me.